So hi everyone, so today I'm going to be doing a comparison between my Olympus TG-5 camera and my Olympus E-M10 Mark II. And the purpose of this video is really to compare the image quality that I'm getting out of the TG-5 versus a known quantity, the E-M10 Mark II, with their kit lenses. Now you've probably seen my other lens tests with this camera already, and we know that these two lenses really do a very good job, even compared to the Pro lenses and the Prime lenses. I mean, they're not quite as sharp, but you know, really good quality. So I wanted to see how good is this camera really compared to like a known quantity. Now, to cover the same focal range, because this has a equivalent 25 to 100 millimeter focal range, I have to use two lenses with the E-M10 Mark II. I have to use the 14 to 42 and the 40 to 150, because I can get 28 millimeters up to 84 millimeters with the standard kit lens, and then I can get the 100 millimeters out of this 40 to 150 equivalent focal range. Now the only thing I'm going to be changing really so that the depth of field is not an issue is I'm going to be shooting these lenses at f5.6. So if anything, that'll make these lenses even a little bit sharper, right? Versus this camera. Now this testing here is going to be part of my long-term review of the TG-5. So just kind of keep that in mind, that I will be doing a review on this camera later on once I'm kind of done with all of my testing. But I thought I'd just share with you, my photo walks, my testing as I go along, and then I'll just wrap it up with a summary in the end. Now, but I'll give you a heads up. This camera, if you stop it down one stop in aperture priority, the TG-5, like wide open, it might be f2. If you stop it down to f2.8, I noticed it's a tiny bit sharper at f2.8, but not enough that I think we need to worry about it for this comparison. But if we're going to really split hairs and fine tune, just a quick tip: shoot this stop down by one stop, which you can do when you're in aperture priority on this camera. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started, and just ignore this rig. This has nothing to do with the testing today. It's not going to have any impact on anything we're doing. This is for another video I'm making, setting up a rig for the TG-5. Alright, so I'm going to have to do a little math to calculate the equivalent apertures between these two. So if I multiply the TG-5 aperture, which was at f2.2, and if I multiply between the difference in the sensor size, I would multiply that by 2.84. So that 2.2 times 2.84 equals 6.248. So roughly I need to put this at aperture f6.3, I think will work. So let me try that. Alright, so it looks like when we were at 2x zoom, or I think 50 millimeter equivalent on the TG-5, we're at f3.2 there. So 3.2 times 2.84. Oops, 2.84. So we need to be at f9 on the E-M10 Mark II. And to be at 50 millimeters, we have to be at focal length of 25 millimeters on the E-M10. Alright, so I'm done taking the pictures, and I tried to match them in terms of depth of field and exposure best I can. Let's go inside and take a look at these on the computer. Alright, so I've picked some images here to compare between the TG-5 and the E-M10 Mark II. And let me just make a few notes before we dive in so that we can keep in mind the differences between these two cameras. One is the E-M10 Mark II is a 16 megapixel camera, and it's a micro four thirds sensor. So in theory it should have 33% sharper image because it has 33% more megapixels than the TG-5. In practice, that's not normally the case. Even if you're comparing 12 megapixel micro four thirds sensor versus a 16 megapixel, you don't normally see that much difference, but keep that in mind when we're looking at these. Also, I tried to match the depth of field the best I can in terms of the f-stop. So f2.2 is roughly f9 on a micro four thirds sensor. because I wanted to compare the corner sharpness in a real life situation. Because you know, I don't have a test chart or a studio or anything, but that's why the apertures are so different than what you would normally be shooting at. And I think finally, just ignore the color, because you know, I had it on auto white balance and the sun kept coming in and out, and I had to dial in some exposure compensation to keep the highlights on my face from clipping, because again, we just want to compare sharpness. So ignore the color and ignore you know, the differences in the exposure values, because ultimately I just want to compare the sharpness between the lenses. So let's go ahead and get started, and we'll start at the 30. And one more note, I'm going to be comparing these at 35 millimeter equivalents of 28 millimeters, 50 millimeters, and 100 millimeters. So we'll start here at 28 millimeters. So I'll pick these two, and let's punch in here. And I have the TG-5 here on the left. Let me compose these roughly the same. And you'll notice, you know, right away, this is a little larger, I think mainly because it's a 16 megapixel image at the same focal length. And I'm zoomed in at 2x, but dead center here, I feel like the TG-5 is holding its own for the most part. It's not bad. Let's look at some of the tree. It's pretty close. How about the fabric here on my scarf? And let's look at the hairline one more time. It's not too bad. I think it's pretty close. Let's look at the corners here. And I think here the TG-5 is a little bit soft. It really starts to get mushy compared to the E-M10. So pretty much at the 25 millimeter equivalent focal length, the TG-5 gets pretty soft in the corners, but not terrible. There's some purple fringing here. Not a big deal. But yeah, 25 millimeter focal range. The TG-5 is definitely softer in the corners, and I don't think it's because of a megapixel difference. I think it's the lens. But in the center, not bad. Pretty close. Ignoring the color, it's pretty close. All right, let's look at the next focal range. Let's look at a normal 50 millimeter equivalent. Let's see, this one and this one. All right, so I have the TG-5 on the left again. Let's look at the hairline. Oh, I gotta recompose. Oh, right about there. Not bad. A little better contrast over here, but I think that's mainly because of the lighting from the sun. This is giving me some good contrast, but this looks like a 12 megapixel image. This looks like a 16 megapixel image. But the sharpness in general, I feel, is pretty close. Like, look at the, there's a tiny little hair here and one here. If you look at this hairline and the eyelashes, I think the TG-5 is doing a pretty good job here. Let's look at the tree. Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, this actually looks a little bit sharper, but that might be a depth of field issue. Yeah, I think it's a depth of field issue. Even though I tried to match these, like 3.2 should be equivalent to f9 on the E-M10, there's still a significant difference here, because this looks blurry due to depth of field to me, and this looks more like a lens getting a little soft in the corners kind of issue. So yeah, I don't understand that. They should be equivalent depths of field. And that shows you when what should be the same in theory is not actually the same when you go out and you practice it. But in the center, if you're taking a picture of a subject, I think in the center, the TG-5 is doing a good job at a 25mm equivalent focal length. All right, let's go to the next one. And this will be at a 100mm equivalent. And yeah, it looks pretty good. Again, a little better contrast over here. And I think the sun was pretty much the same in this case, looking at the lighting. But let's compare, recompose a little bit. Actually, I think the TG-5 now looks a little sharper when it's extended all the way out to its full telephoto range. Let's look at the fabric. Yeah, it looks sharper than the E-M10 now. And my guess would be, like, look at the stitching here. I mean, again, there's better contrast over here, but I think this is because I have this E-M10 Mark II at f/14, so it's definitely getting softer because of, I guess, diffraction or whatever it is that causes a lens to get soft when you stop it down that far. Let's look at the corners. How about this corner? Okay, not too bad. I can still see the stitching in the fabric, but it's definitely not as good as the E-M10 Mark II. How about this corner? Again, I think this is a depth of field issue and not a lens issue, but yeah, it's soft. It's soft. Not that it's supposed to be sharp because of the depth of field, but let's look at the leaf in the corner here. This should be, yeah, it gets soft in the corners still, but not as bad as I think at the other focal lengths. I think it still looks pretty good. One last look. All right, not bad for a TG-5. I feel pretty comfortable with this camera taking a decent image, but there it is. You guys make your own decision. I'm pretty comfortable with it because it is a 12 megapixel camera, so I think a lot of the differences have to do with that. And I also feel like, yeah, the wide open, like at this 25mm focal range, the lens does seem very, very soft in the corners. Yeah, there's no reason for it to be this soft when in the center it looks pretty good to me. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up the testing today. And like I said, this is part of a series of testing that I'll be doing with the TG-5. And normally I wouldn't share these kinds of videos with you, but I figured why not? If I'm going to be testing it, I might as well share it with you guys. Because it's not a complete test by any means, right? It was just a simple, let's test the sharpness at different focal lengths. And my gut feeling is it did a pretty good job. I wasn't super satisfied with the results, but I think they came out pretty good. I'm going to have to do more testing. This was just the first round for me to develop my testing methodology. And I understand people aren't really cross-shopping the E-M10 Mark II with the TG-5. I mean, I bought the TG-5 because I just wanted a little pocket camera to take with me everywhere. And I bought it because it's an Olympus, right? But I think it's important that if you're going to test or review a camera, you can't do it in a vacuum. You have to be able to compare it against something. And the E-M10 Mark II is a known quantity to me, and I'm sure many of you. So that's why I'm doing these tests. And I also have a vlogging rig I'm setting up that's turning out to be pretty cool. And I'm going to be doing some more video testing and more night shots testing on a tripod. And I found some workarounds, and I found some tweaks that will help you get some better images out of it. So I'm really trying to get to know this camera like I know the E-M10 or my Pen F, because to get the best images out of the cameras, you really have to know them inside and out. And that's what I'm trying to do, and that's why I'm doing this testing, and that's why I'm sharing it with you, you know, so that you can follow along with me. And then in the end, hopefully, when you buy this camera, you know what to expect, right? If this is the right camera for you, if it's going to perform at the level that you expect or hope it would. And so far, it's meeting my expectations, you know, by far. You know, it's exceeding some of my expectations in some cases. So I'll just end it there. So if you'd like to see more videos like this, just let me know. Or if you'd like to see me do any other kind of testing on this camera or comparisons, just let me know that as well. I'd be happy to give it a shot if I have the gear to compare it with. And, you know, as always, I appreciate you guys watching, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.